This is a case that explains the law on conversion of customary law marriages to ordinance marriages. Caution, vigilance, and compliance are the watchwords. It was May 1974 in Ghana, and a man named John APPIAH had just died. He was a respected circuit steward at the Akimswedro Methodist Church, a pillar of his community. But he left behind no will, and now his family was just about to tear itself apart over a single burning question. What kind of marriage did he really have? On one side stood his widow, Mrs. Dora APPIAH, who claimed that for decades she had been known throughout Akimswedro as Mrs. APPIAH. She had carried the title with pride, believing herself to be in a monogamous marriage under the marriage ordinance. On the other side was Mr. YEBOAH, John's customary successor, backed by his family, ready to claim what he believed was rightfully theirs under customary law. Mr. YEBOAH initiated proceedings at the High Court in Cape Coast, asking the court to determine what kind of marriage was contracted. Back in 1974, before modern inheritance laws like PNDC Law 111 came into the picture, the type of marriage you had determined your fate entirely. If Mrs. APPIAH could prove she was married under the ordinance, she would walk away with 2/3 of her husband's estates. 2/3. But if the court found that she was only married under customary law, she could keep just one house, and everything else, all other property and assets, would go to Mr. YEBOAH as the customary successor. The stakes were really high. Mrs. APPIAH told her story with conviction. Yes, she admitted that in 1939, she and John married under customary law. But that wasn't the end of the journey. She insisted that they decided together to elevate their union, to make it monogamous in the eyes of God and the law. Her recollection of events was that they approached Reverend Marking, superintendent minister, and he arranged everything properly. Bans were announced just as required by law. She and her husband were deliberate, checking to ensure the premises was licensed and that the priest was also licensed. After the ceremony, she was issued a marriage certificate, and for 30 years, she claimed that she was Mrs. Dora APPIAH, the undisputed wife. Her husband never took another wife, and this was her story. And Mr. YEBOAH had a different story, and he brought receipts. He called to the witness stand one Mr. Ampofo, a church member who was there and saw it all. Ampofo was a class leader, a lay preacher, and leader of the singing band. Critically, he had no stake in the fight. He was not related to any of the parties involved. His testimony was very straightforward. He explained that at some point, church leadership wanted to make John APPIAH a circuit steward, and Reverend Markin set one condition. John's customary marriage needed to be blessed. That was all, just blessed. John agreed, and the blessing happened quietly at the mission house. Then it was announced to the congregation afterwards, and that was it. Things got interesting at the trial. Mr. YEBOAH produced a document. It was faded, but it was official, dated March 1944. It was titled Methodist Church, Gold Coast, Christian Blessing of Marriage, according to customary law certificate. The document explicitly stated that John and Dora were duly married aforetime in accordance with the customary law of Ghana, and has solemnly promised before God and in the presence of his people to observe the Christian law respecting marriage. The language was clear and unmistakable. This was not a new marriage. This was the church recognizing and blessing an existing customary marriage, sanctioning them not to marry again, but not transforming their legal status. Mrs. APPIAH's entire claim rested on proving an ordinance marriage, but here was a document in black and white contradicting her version of events. The judge examined the law meticulously. An ordinance marriage, he noted, required strict formalities: published bans, licensed premises, authorized minister, and most importantly, a proper marriage certificate. Failure to comply with any of these formalities will render that marriage completely invalid. The document before him showed none of these hallmarks. Instead, it showed exactly what Mr. Ampofo testified to: a blessing and nothing more. The court weighed the testimony. On one side, Mrs. APPIAH's passionate recollections, her 30 years of being called Mrs., and her belief in what her marriage was. On the other hand, Mr. Ampofo, a disinterested witness with intimate knowledge of what happened, whose testimony was in perfect alignment with the documentary evidence. It was clear that Mr. Ampofo's version of events was more preferred. The judge made some observations. Indeed, if Reverend Marking, an experienced minister well versed in these matters, truly intended to perform an ordinance marriage, would he have been so careless so as to defeat that very purpose? Would he have issued a certificate explicitly calling it a blessing of a customary marriage? It simply made no sense. The court took judicial notice of a reality that persists even today. Protestant churches in Ghana routinely bless customary marriages, asking couples to promise before God not to take additional spouses. But these blessings, no matter how sacred, did not convert customary marriages into ordinance marriages in the eyes of the law. A man who underwent such a blessing and later married again, only faced the wrath of the church, but certainly not criminal prosecution for bigamy. Mrs. APPIAH's claim was rejected. After 30 years of believing herself a wife under the ordinance, entitled to security and protection, she learned that she would only receive a single house. Everything else, the bulk of her late husband's estate, would be vested in Mr. YEBOAH. She had lived her life as Mrs. APPIAH, but in the end, that title meant little. So what do we learn? First, while you seek to convert a marriage from customary to ordinance, you have to comply with the law. No shortcuts and no assumptions. Second, documentation is absolutely critical. Every document you sign matters. You must examine each one carefully to ensure that your intentions are being satisfied, and you must store them for a rainy day. And finally, just being called Mrs. was not enough to make you a wife under the ordinance. Social recognition, church blessings, community acceptance, none of these can replace strict legal compliance. The tragedy of Mrs. APPIAH's story was that she truly believed, that for 3 decades that she was in a monogamous relationship with her husband. But belief, no matter how sincere, is not the same as proof. Follow Super Law GA Studios for more real stories, real cases, real people.